Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping barefoot into the squishy, unpaved world of medieval communication, where mailboxes don't exist. Postmen don't wear uniforms, and if your message actually arrives, you owe someone a flagon of ale. You're about to follow the path of a single letter sent across the medieval countryside, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these sleepy little history tales travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through ankle-deep muck, the sound of wet leather squelching with each step as the sky above you spits a slow drizzle. There's no sign of a paved road here, just a churned-up dirt track winding between hedgerows and villages that smell like damp straw and uncertainty. You're carrying a sealed letter in your satchel, and you've been told to guard it with your life. Unfortunately, your life isn't worth much in 13th century rural France. You glance around. There's no postal office, no mailbox, no cheerful carrier in shorts rolling up in a little cart. Just you, your aching legs, and a suspicious crow eyeballing you from a crooked wooden signpost. You wonder if the crow's working for someone. Paranoia is part of the job. The medieval world doesn't make communication easy. With no centralized system, every letter is a gamble. Most nobles rely on personal messengers, usually young lads with strong legs and low survival instincts. You, dear traveler, have been volunteered, possibly as punishment, possibly as an honor. You're not sure anymore. As you pass a village, a group of children run by chasing a pig who may or may not have eaten part of the local priest's sermon. You ask for directions. An old woman offers you a boiled onion and points vaguely toward the hills. That's about as reliable as GPS gets in this century. There's no uniformity in route's timing or safety. Roads are treacherous, and the local bandits are just former mercenaries with worse manners. Some stretches of land are owned by feuding lords who think shooting trespassers counts as sport. And then there's the weather rain snow or worse spring mud, which clings to your boots like cursed glue. And yet messages did get through. Not all, but many. Enough that treaties were signed, wars declared, marriages arranged, and secrets betrayed. Historians still argue whether the reliability of message delivery was due to sheer determination or blind luck. You suspect both. You pause under a willow tree to check the seal on your message. It's still intact red wax with a pressed emblem that looks like a lion biting a chalice. Or maybe it's a squirrel. Heraldry is hard. If the seal breaks, the message could be considered tampered with, and heads have rolled for less. You start walking again. Every so often you pass a wooden shrine or a roadside cross often draped with offerings and the occasional half-melted candle. You consider leaving the letter there as a divine offering, but decide against it. Delivering mail may be dangerous, but divine wrath is unpredictable and usually itchy. As dusk creeps in, you reach a manor house surrounded by a half-collapsed stone wall and guarded by 2 sheep with no sense of personal space. You announce yourself, and a tired servant emerges, looks at your mud-covered face, and mutters something about bloody couriers always turning up at dinner. You hand over the letter with dramatic flair, as if expecting applause. Instead, the servant gives you a nod, tosses a coin your way, likely copper, and disappears inside. That's it. No signature, no tip, no 5-star rating. You might be allowed to sleep in the stable if you're lucky. If not, there's a dry patch under the eaves with your name on it. Despite the chaos, you know something important. You were part of the ancient, barely functioning engine of communication that helped hold kingdoms together. No mailboxes, no postcodes, just human grit, dumb luck, and maybe a half-trained raven somewhere in the mix. And as you curl up next to a bale of hay, listening to the grumble of your stomach and the gentle snores of a goat nearby, you realize something comforting. Tomorrow someone else will be carrying the next letter. Hopefully, unless it's you again. Which, let's be honest, it probably is. You wake to a goat chewing on your cloak and a stable boy asking if you're dead. You're not just stiff cold and possibly slightly fermented. The manner is quiet, but your next task is already in hand, a new letter. Different wax seal and instructions scribbled hastily on a piece of bark. Welcome back to the glamorous world of medieval correspondence. This time, you're headed to an abbey 2 towns over. Should be easier, you think. Fewer wolves, maybe. But as you set out, your thoughts drift to the strange group of people who, like you, risk their health and hygiene to carry words between distant places. Not all messengers are as underpaid and underfed as you. Some are monks, quiet-robed figures gliding from abbey to abbey, trading letters, church decrees, and sometimes gossip. Written in script so florid it looks like a bird sneezed, these holy couriers often travel in pairs' heads, bowed sandals flapping, looking like they're on a mission from God. Technically, they are. The church had its own communication network, slow but reliable, built on trust routine, and the shared knowledge that if you stole a monk's letter, you might get excommunicated, or, worse, publicly lectured. You pass through a muddy hamlet where children are swinging from a broken cart, and a woman with arms like tree trunks offers you suspicious bread. You nod politely and keep walking. Not worth the digestive risk. Soon you spot another type of messenger, this one on horseback, wearing light mail and a helmet too shiny for someone who claims to be discreet. Knights occasionally served as high-value messengers, especially when transporting royal declarations or marriage contracts. You exchange nods. He looks bored, and you wonder if his letter is scandalous. Maybe a duke is eloping with a jester. Stranger things have happened. Some kings had entire stables of messengers. Fast riders trained to gallop from outpost to outpost, switching horses at stations called posting inns. The Persian Empire had something similar centuries earlier, and the Mongols turned it into an art form. But in medieval Europe, it was mostly ad hoc and chaotic. If a lord wanted a message delivered, he found someone he trusted, or someone too poor to say no, and sent them off with a sealed parchment and a vague map. Historians still argue whether these early messenger systems counted as organized or just repeated improvisation. Either way, the letters got there. Usually. Then there were the hired professionals. They called them nuncii, not to be confused with nuns, though the pronunciation sometimes led to awkward mix-ups. These nuncii could be anything from well-educated scribes to streetwise lads with fast feet and a high tolerance for blisters. They memorized routes, bribed toll keepers, and carried credentials proving they weren't bandits, just underpaid letter carriers who hoped not to be mistaken for spies. Ah, yes, spies. But we'll get to them later. You pause to rest by a stream, letting your feet soak and your thoughts wander. Somewhere out there, another messenger is crossing a river with a letter clutched under their shirt. Another is arguing with a toll collector about whether the king's seal exempts them from the bridge fee. And another probably is napping under a tree after getting hopelessly lost. You feel oddly connected to this ragtag league of mail runners, an unofficial brotherhood, an occasional sisterhood of moving words. A young boy walks past barefoot and grinning, balancing a basket on his head. Inside is a small wax-sealed scroll. His errand, his responsibility, perhaps even his first big task. You wave. He waves back. That was you once. Still is. As you near the abbey, the road improves, marginally cobbles instead of pure muck, and the air smells faintly of smoke, incense, and sheep. A monk greets you with a raised brow. You hand over the letter. He takes it without comment, but you see the flicker of interest as he studies the seal. Inside that scroll could be anything. A request for grain, a heresy complaint, or a very delicate problem involving a missing relic and a suspiciously quiet cat. You're not told what it says. You never are. But you're offered a bowl of warm soup and a place to sit by the fire, and in this life that counts as first-class treatment. You slurp the soup lentils, and something leafy stretch your sore back, and consider asking the monks about their own delivery network. They probably have stories. But silence reigns here, and besides, you're already half asleep. Tomorrow, another letter, another journey, another chance to cross paths with messenger boys, armored riders, and secretive monks who somehow know more than they let on. This isn't a postal system. It's a living maze of mud loyalty and mystery. And for now, it's the closest thing to communication the medieval world has. You wake to the soft chant of morning prayers echoing through the abbey walls. Somewhere, a monk sneezes with terrifying precision. Your legs are still sore, your cloak is still damp, and your next assignment waits rolled tightly and tucked into a small wooden tube, sealed with wax and strung with a thin piece of leather. The monk who hands it to you offers a cryptic smile. That's either a blessing or a warning. As you step back onto the cobbled road, you glance again at the seal, an unfamiliar crest, a boar standing on its hind legs, holding what looks like a spoon. Noble families did love their odd symbols. This one is pressed into deep red wax, warm in the sun. In the medieval world, the wax seal is more than just a sticker. It's identity, authority, and security in a world where anyone could scribble something on parchment and pretend it's from the king. You clutch the tube carefully. If this seal breaks before it's delivered, you'll need more than prayers to save your skin. Seals were like medieval passwords, visual proof that a message came from the person it claimed to. Rich folks used signet rings, carved stamps, or even their teeth marks seriously to press designs into the wax. And while red was common, other colors were sometimes used: black for death notices, green for royal forests, and blue for, well, that depended on who you asked. Historians still argue whether blue seals meant trust rank or just a surplus of lapis lazuli. As you walk, you unroll a piece of parchment from your pocket, an old one just for practice. You stare at the loops, curls, and impossible angles of medieval script. It's Latin probably, or maybe French. It's hard to tell when every letter looks like a tired worm doing yoga. You try copying one word. It ends up looking like a cow tripped on a vine. Scribes were the gatekeepers of knowledge. The good ones had beautiful, almost musical handwriting. The bad ones? Let's just say some royal messages have been reinterpreted very, very generously over the years. One famous case involved a misread word that caused a noble family to send pigs instead of soldiers. Still debated, but deeply entertaining. There's a system to medieval script: blackletter Carolingian minuscule Gothic cursive. But unless you're trained, it's like deciphering ancient alien text, which, to be fair, is part of its charm. You wonder how many messengers like you peeked at messages out of curiosity, only to squint, shrug, and assume it was all about grain or war. Some messages weren't even written on parchment. Wealthier patrons used vellum, specially prepared calfskin that smelled vaguely of regret and royalty. It was smooth, durable, and expensive, which meant people took care with what they wrote, or who they hired to write it. Scribes were often monks, but wealthy courts had secular scribes too, some of whom were notorious for slipping jokes or passive-aggressive complaints into the margins. You remember hearing about one such scribe who, fed up with constant corrections, added a line at the bottom of a royal decree. May the reader of this message have better luck than I did writing it. No one caught it for decades. You pause to eat a bit of dry bread near a stone milestone that probably once told travelers how far they were from Rome, but now just hosts moss and a sleepy lizard. As you chew, you reflect on how fragile this whole communication system is. One stumble, one cracked wax seal, one poorly timed rainstorm, and centuries of knowledge, command, or gossip could be lost forever. Some messengers carried small folding tablets coated in wax where they could jot temporary notes using a stylus. These could be erased, and reused an early form of texting, minus the emojis. Others carried coded messages, simple substitution ciphers, or complex numeric codes that only certain clerks knew how to read. If you were really unlucky, your message was in Greek. Good luck finding someone who could read that in Northern England. Historians still debate how widespread literacy actually was in the Middle Ages. It wasn't just about knowing letters. It was about recognizing forms, seals, symbols. A peasant might not read, but could still know what a certain crest meant. A merchant might not write Latin, but could read numbers and contracts. The line between literate and just clever was blurrier than modern folks imagine. As the sun climbs higher, you come across a small roadside chapel where a traveling friar is offering blessings and oddly reading letters aloud to a group of gathered villagers. Some are crying, others laughing. One just looks confused. You realize that many messages didn't arrive in private. If you couldn't read, someone else would do it for you. And depending on their tone, they might edit the story just a little. You move on the letter still safe in its wooden tube, the seal intact, the script inside unreadable, but somehow sacred. It doesn't matter if you understand the words. What matters is that you carry them, that you guard their weight, that you pass them along mud and all across this stubborn, beautiful, utterly impractical world. And maybe, just maybe, whoever opens this letter will remember the poor soul who hauled it across the kingdom. The sun is high now, casting long spears of light between the trees as you follow a narrow woodland trail. You're starting to think you've become part animal, navigating more by scent instinct and moss than actual maps. Your boots are stained, your satchel's beginning to rot, and the letter you're carrying rests in its tube like a sleeping viper. But today, you're not walking the whole way. You're getting a horse. Kind of. The beast you're handed at the next manor outpost is technically a horse, though it appears to be assembled from leftover parts of other moodier horses. Its ears flick constantly, and it regards you with open contempt. Still, compared to walking, this is a luxury assuming you survive. Mounted couriers were the premium delivery service of the medieval world. Nobles, kings, and wealthy merchants often relied on trained riders to carry their messages fast across long distances. These messengers switched horses at relay points when available, and some could cover nearly 80 to 100 kilometers, 50 to 60 miles in a day weather and brigands permitting. Compare that to your walking pace, which on a good day is maybe 25 kilometers, 15 miles, if your knees aren't staging a protest. You settle into the saddle and realize something very important. You are not a trained rider. The horse knows this and immediately tests you by pretending to be frightened of a rock. You survive the minor bucking incident with only moderate loss of dignity. Still, it's faster. The road blurs by. Trees become green streaks. The wind rushes past your ears like the whisper of forgotten tongues. It's exhilarating until you remember that mounted messengers were also easier to spot, easier to chase, and much more fun to rob. You slow your pace. Medieval mail had many delivery methods depending on who was sending it and how valuable the message was. If you were poor, you walked. If you were rich, you sent a horse. But if you were eccentric or desperate, or both, you tried something entirely different, like birds. Yes, birds. Homing pigeons, to be specific, have been used since ancient times. The Romans used them. So did the Crusaders. Falcons were flashier, but less cooperative, and not exactly message-friendly. In the Middle Ages, some rulers experimented with bird-borne messages, usually tiny notes tied to the leg, or tucked into tiny tubes strapped to their backs. The trick, of course, was training them to go where you wanted and not to get eaten mid-flight. Historians still argue whether bird messaging was widely used in Europe during the medieval period, or if it was more myth than mail. Some Arabic and Persian sources suggest pigeon post was far more advanced in the Islamic world, but there's no doubt that someone somewhere tied a message to a bird and crossed their fingers. You briefly consider trying that yourself until you remember you can't even get this horse to turn left on command. Then there were runners on foot alone, and terrifyingly fast. In parts of the British Isles and Scandinavia, there were trained message runners who could cover vast distances in rough terrain, often barefoot, often uphill both ways. Okay, maybe not both ways, but certainly barefoot. You pass a scarred milestone etched with ancient script and wonder if some exhausted runner collapsed here centuries ago, clutching a now-forgotten scroll about taxes, pigs, or scandal. Some kingdoms had official relays, small networks of couriers who passed letters from one rider or runner to the next. Think medieval FedEx, but with more fleas. One famous system existed in the Mongol Empire, the Yam, a network of stations where messengers could rest, swap horses, and eat fermented milk. The Europeans never matched that scale, but a few tried. You come across one such relay, just a wooden hut with a carved post out front and a tired-looking boy playing dice with a chicken. He offers to water your horse and brings out a fresh one, sleek fast, and infinitely more polite. You swap mounts and stretch your legs, trying not to groan. Inside the hut, scratched into the timber walls, are notes from other messengers. Names, destinations, crude drawings, the occasional coded message. One says simply, "Don't trust the man with the yellow boots." You make a mental note. Before leaving, you spot an odd leather harness hanging on the wall, fitted with a scroll tube and a pouch for coins. It's messenger gear. You consider stealing it, but then remember karma and monks. Always watching. As you ride away, the woods give way to open hills, and your pace increases. The wind smells of heather and something faintly alarming. Probably sheep. You pass a group of traveling merchants, one of whom winks and says, "Got any secrets in that satchel?" You smile but say nothing. It's safer that way. By late afternoon, you reach the next village. The sun dips low. The letter is still safe, still sealed. Your horse snorts in approval or possibly judgment. You've just experienced the full range of medieval delivery. Foot horse, maybe bird, and definitely chaos. Whether sprinting with a scroll or clinging to a jittery mare, the job stays the same. Keep the message intact, arrive breathing, and if possible, don't throw up on the parchment. Evening shadows stretch long as you ride into a market town. Wood smoke in the air, the faint scent of roasting meat, and the unmistakable tang of too many unwashed bodies packed too closely together. This town, you're told, is a postal relay. You squint. It looks more like a loud tavern attached to a slightly less loud stable. But appearances lie, and this noisy, grimy place is where medieval mail magic happens. You tie off your horse, who promptly tries to bite you one last time for good measure, and head inside. The tavern buzzes with the kind of energy only found where travelers, couriers, and drunken scribes collide. It's here that messages change hands. Quite literally. This is the not-so-royal mail. There's no official logo, no sorting office, and certainly no uniforms unless ale-stained tunics count. Instead, you find a rotating cast of messengers, errand boys, disgraced knights, and one suspiciously well-dressed goose sitting near the hearth. Nobody asks what it's doing there. This is not a place for questions. You hand your sealed letter to the barkeep, who serves as tonight's unofficial postmaster. He examines the seal, grunts, and slots it into a wooden cubbyhole alongside others, marked with chalked symbols: a tree, a sun, a fish. It's not exactly the Dewey Decimal System, but it works. Sort of. This place functions as a relay, one of many across the medieval landscape. The idea is simple. You, the tired courier, hand off your letter to someone who's headed further along its path. You get food, maybe rest, and the message continues. Sometimes. Hopefully. But these handoffs aren't always clean. A message might sit for days if no rider wants to take it, or it might go with someone who pockets the delivery fee and tosses the scroll into a ditch. Trust is everything, and also in short supply. so some senders use passwords. Yes, medieval passwords. You're instructed to tell the next courier the phrase 4 crows at midnight and expect a reply, but none that sing. If they mess it up, you don't hand over the letter, unless they're holding a sword, in which case you maybe reconsider. Messages are sorted not by zip code, but by routes known to the locals. Take the coast road to the Split Oak, then left at the Abbey with the leaky roof. If you're lucky, someone's carved a rune or tied a ribbon to the right tree. If not, well, good luck. Historians still argue whether these systems count as organized mail or just a particularly determined game of medieval telephone. Some point to semi-regular routes in England, France, and parts of Italy. Others claim it was all informal, inconsistent, and fueled mostly by booze and favors. You overhear one man at the bar telling a story about a message delivered using a team of relay swimmers crossing a chain of lakes. The others laugh, but he swears it's true. Another courier leans over to boast he once delivered a royal letter in record time, using a shortcut through a plague-stricken village. You politely scoot away from him, after a greasy supper of whatever that was, and a mug of something trying very hard to be ale, you settle into a corner. Around you, other couriers trade information. Road conditions, dangerous toll bridges, rumors of war, and who's paying extra for discretion. You listen closely. You might need that knowledge tomorrow. A lanky teenager with too many freckles plops down beside you. Going east, he asks. You nod cautiously. I've got a scroll headed toward the coast. It's wrapped in lambskin and tied with green ribbon. Deliver it, and I'll owe you a favor. You ask what kind of favor. He grins and says, the kind that might keep you alive. You take the scroll. By candlelight, you glance around and see the tavern in full motion, scribes re-inking their quills, tired horses being rubbed down outside, and couriers comparing seal patterns the way others might compare sword hilts. It's messy, but it works. This isn't a system. It's an organism, a living, wheezing creature stitched together by necessity and ale. There's no central command, no rules that apply everywhere, just a shared understanding. If you carry a message, carry it well or expect trouble. Some couriers carve small marks into the wooden beams when they complete a delivery. You see dozens tiny symbols of pride, survival, and sometimes warning. One mark is shaped like a snake swallowing its tail. Another simply reads, "Lost it. Still sorry." Before you sleep, you check your own satchel. The original letter's gone, passed on, but you now carry 2 others. One from a merchant to his sister, the other from a widow to a faraway priest. Both are sealed unread and wrapped with string that smells faintly of lavender. You lie back on a straw-stuffed mattress that groans in protest and stare at the flickering ceiling shadows. You're part of something now. Not a machine. Not even a profession. A tradition, maybe. A chain of hands, muddy boots, quick horses, and smarter than average birds. Tomorrow, you ride again. But tonight, you rest in the only place mail gets truly sorted by the fire over drinks with a pocket full of secrets. The next morning, you wake up to shouting. Not an emergency, just 2 couriers arguing over who was supposed to take a letter to the bishop's summer estate. Apparently, someone forgot the difference between St. Benedict's Hill and St. Bernard's Hollow, which are not, in fact, the same place. One has sheep. The other has rumors of bandits dressed like friars. Easy mistake. You gather your gear and check the 2 new scrolls in your satchel. Seals unbroken. Ribbons intact. No goats have chewed on them in the night. All things considered, you're doing better than average. You step outside only to find your horse missing. The innkeeper shrugs. Probably swapped at dawn, he mutters. We had a pair from Bruges heading out early. Took something left. Something. You stare at the shaggy gray donkey tied in its place. It stares back unblinking, as if daring you to complain. You sigh. Fine, you mutter. Let's ride. You don't ride, you bounce. The road winds through sparse trees and rolling fields, and your mind begins to wander. Specifically, it wanders to the many, many ways a message could end up in the wrong hands, or worse, the right hands at the wrong time. Medieval mail had enemies, lots of them. Spies, for one. Letters weren't just for inviting people to dinner or asking for loans. They carried troop movements, assassination hints, plans for revolts, and confessions of affairs with people you definitely shouldn't be involved with. Rulers employed spies to intercept rival messages, break seals, and sometimes replace the entire letter with a forged version. The stakes were high, and the ink was rarely dry. One well-documented method: heating the wax seal just enough to pry it open with a thin knife reading the letter, and then reapplying the same wax to reseal it, sometimes with a copied signet. Skilled forgers had whole collections of stolen stamps, creating a kind of medieval identity theft operation. Historians still debate how widespread this forgery industry really was, but there's no question some of history's greatest backstabbings started with someone reading someone else's mail. You bounce along on your donkey wondering if any of the letters you're carrying are fake. You'd never know. The parchment feels real. The ribbon smells nice. But one of those scrolls might contain carefully rewritten orders meant to ruin someone's life. Then there's the matter of secret writing codes, invisible ink, and clever hiding places. Lemon juice or onion water could be used to write between the lines, only revealed by heat or special chemicals. If you had access to them, other messages were disguised entirely hidden inside hollowed-out book spines, sewn into clothing, or written in tiny script inside a nutshell. You've heard of one messenger who smuggled a message inside a sausage casing. Not a dry scroll, an actual meat sausage. The message survived. The sausage did not. And then there's the really strange stuff. Some messengers tattooed secret messages on their scalp and then let their hair grow out. By the time they arrived, they'd shave it off and deliver the message quite literally on their heads. Fringe tactic. Absolutely. But it worked. Sometimes. As long as the recipient didn't mind a very personal kind of letter. You're about to laugh at the absurdity when you spot something on the path ahead. Movement low and fast. You grip your donkey's reins, which, to be fair, are more ceremonial than functional, and slow your pace. A group of rough-looking men step out from behind a stone wall. Not soldiers. Not bandits exactly. Something in between toll enforcers. Self-appointed, of course. One wears half a helmet, the other has a crossbow with a limp string. The leader grinning with 4 teeth too many, or not enough waves you down. What's in the bag, friend? You smile. Nothing you'd want, just letters. Boring ones. He steps closer. Some letters are worth a lot. You shrug. Some aren't even worth reading. He snatches the satchel. You hold your breath. But instead of opening the scrolls, he smells one, then hands it back. Smells like monk stuff. Not worth the trouble. He motions you onward. You don't ask questions. You don't look back. Later, when the sun is high and the road clear, you stop to rest near a riverbank. Your donkey slurps water while you stretch your spine and check the scrolls again. One is slightly damp. You dry it with your tunic. You've learned that the smallest air or moisture cracked, wax-wrinkled parchment can mean suspicion accusation or worse. To guard against forgery, some messengers carried tokens, rings carved sticks, knotted cords with specific patterns. These proofs were shown to recipients verifying the messenger's authenticity. If you were caught without one, your whole delivery might be rejected, even punished. The burden of proof was very real and very heavy. The church too kept its own secret letter archives. The papal curia used secretary official scribes who drafted sensitive correspondence and sometimes encoded them. Only certain bishops or royal agents could break the codes. Some of these letters are still being decrypted today. Historians argue whether the complexity of these codes was overkill or a brilliant precaution. You suspect both. Always both. As dusk approaches, you pass a crumbling stone tower and hear singing, faint off-key, slightly drunk. It's another relay point possibly, or just a tavern with questionable acoustics. Either way, you head toward the light, because tonight you'll sleep with your satchel clutched to your chest, a dagger under your pillow, and the lingering fear that somewhere out there, someone's still chasing a message that was never meant to arrive. The floor creaks under your weight as you step into the tavern, a low-roofed, smoky room, buzzing with the murmurs of merchants' pilgrims, and at least 2 people who are pretending not to be spies. A man near the hearth is reciting a tale about a scribe who miscopied an entire royal charter, replacing grain tax exemption with grain tax explosion. Everyone laughs, probably because it's true. You find a corner seat near a candle stub and gently set your satchel on the bench beside you. The letters inside haven't stirred, but they feel heavier now, as if soaked with the secrets of the road. It's here, among the din of clanking cups and the smell of roasted onions, that you start to notice them, the clerks. They're everywhere, quiet, observing, hands ink-stained, fingers twitching toward the invisible pull of a quill. These are the scribes and writers of the medieval mail world. Without them, there is no letter. Without them, no message reaches its form. You lean back, watching one such clerk hunched over a table by the window. He's writing with the concentration of a monk, decoding divine prophecy, and the scowl of a man who's run out of good ink. His pen scratches across the parchment like a rat dancing on snow. You inch closer. The parchment is laid atop a wooden board. His left hand holds it steady. His right loops and coils black ink into elegant chaos. At his feet are discarded sheets, errors, edits, or perhaps something more deliberate. You're not sure. He glances up, sees you watching, and gestures you over. "Courier?" he asks, not unkindly. You nod. "Lucky for you," he says, "I've just finished something legible." Legible is generous. Medieval calligraphy was as much art as function. Scribes were trained for years, not just in penmanship, but in spelling grammar and how not to explode in frustration over misshapen vowels. The best had a reputation. Noble courts fought to hire them. Monasteries trained them like prized horses, and wandering scholars begged them for copies of rare texts. He offers you a scrap of scrap, a trial flourish most likely. You hold it close. It smells of iron gall, ink, and regret. The letters are exquisite, high Gothic style with angular ascenders and loops so tight they could trap fleas. You imagine the letter you're carrying now, wrapped, sealed, protected, was once just a blank sheet in a clerk's stack. A canvas, a trap, a promise. Not all scribes were monks. That's a modern myth. By the later Middle Ages, secular scribes were everywhere, serving towns, courts, merchants, and guilds. Some even had shops you walked in, dictated your letter, and they wrote it while correcting your grammar and silently judging your love life. You ask the clerk if he's ever copied something truly strange. He grins. Once wrote a letter entirely in rhyme. For a butcher, to his mistress. He paid extra to have it delivered with a bouquet of parsley. He pauses, then leans closer. But the strangest A scroll written backward. Mirror script. So only the intended reader could use a polished plate to read it. Took me hours. He laughs quietly, then adds, "I still don't know what it said." Historians still argue whether medieval mirror writing was common, or just an oddity used occasionally for secrecy or flair. Some even suggest certain scribes developed personalized shorthand or hidden symbols like tiny dots to mark sarcasm or warning. You glance around the tavern and notice others like him, men and women with inky sleeves, rough fingers and eyes that miss nothing. They're more than record keepers. They're gatekeepers. They know how to turn spoken desire into enduring command. back in your corner, you unroll your own spare scrap of vellum and try copying one of the clerk's flourishes. It ends poorly. Your H looks like it slipped on butter. The ink puddles in the corner, and the parchment frowns at you somehow. Clerks often added decorations to letters not for beauty, but for meaning. A curled vine could denote friendship. A thorny rose might hint at insult, and those little doodles in the margins, not always innocent. Some carried messages of their own, silent jabs, coded jokes, secret prayers, and of course, there were the scribes who embedded warnings. Whoever reads this letter without right shall choke on ink. May the unauthorized carrier of these words lose their feet to frost. You laugh quietly. It's absurd. It's beautiful. It's medieval mail drama at its finest. Outside, a storm begins a low rumble of thunder. Distant lightning illuminating the path you'll take at dawn. You check your letters again. One bears a seal you now recognize from a wax imprint above the clerk's desk. His hand, his work, your burden. Before heading to bed, you scribble something on your spare parchment, a copy of a phrase you overheard earlier. All ink is memory. You fold it carefully and tuck it in your sleeve. As you climb the creaky stairs to a rented loft with a mattress that smells faintly of rosemary and goat, you think of the scribes, the ones who bend a language into shape, who give voice to kings and merchants and mothers from faraway towns, the ones who leave behind no tombs, no statues, just letters scattered like breadcrumbs through time. And tomorrow, you'll carry one of those crumbs toward its next uncertain stop. The rain has passed, but it left behind a world soaked in silver droplets hanging from leaves. Puddles like small mirrors across the road, and a dampness in your boots that no sun will ever cure. You mount your donkey again, who now answers to the name Damp Sock, and resume your journey with 2 letters in your satchel, each sealed with delicate care and likely containing arguments, debts, or declarations of love disguised as business. You've grown used to carrying messages on fine parchment, or vellum folded carefully and sealed with wax. But today's stop changes that. The road curves past a hillside fortress, and you're summoned loudly by a grizzled guard at the gate. He's waving what appears to be a sword, but closer inspection reveals it's a long blade etched with words. Actual words. You blink. That. A message? A threat, he replies proudly. In case the Baron forgets who owns this land. You're offered bread and dried pears, while the local scribe explains that sometimes parchment isn't dramatic enough. If you want your message to really land, you put it somewhere no one can ignore. Swords, it turns out, were occasionally engraved with names, oaths, and curses. Not just decorative functional. A reminder to friend and foe alike. One sword carried in a border feud was etched with "He who draws me drinks of lies." Another bore the names of every man its owner had defeated, like a very stabby resume. Historians still debate whether such inscriptions were meant as formal messages or just intimidation. Some argue that they served ceremonial purposes. Others believe they were used quite literally to deliver messages through blood and steel. You prefer parchment, slightly less fatal. Beyond weapons, messages found strange homes. In rural villages, public notices were scrawled on wooden doors or nailed to church posts. If someone wanted to shame a neighbor or accuse a rival, they'd hang a message where everyone could see it. A medieval group text, if you will, except no one could mute it. Some nobles took it further. They hired town criers, not just to shout news in the square, but to deliver verbal messages in rhyme riddle or song. The idea make the message memorable, and no one forgets the sender. You try composing a rhyme in your head and fail by the second line. Stick to writing. There's even a tale whispered more than told about a noble who had a message branded into the leather of a traveling merchant's pack mule. Supposedly, the mule wandered far and wide, carrying a warning to thieves. Whether that story's true, or just a warning to pack lightly is anyone's guess. You stop at a crossroads shrine, tired and thirsty, and meet a healer from the coast. She's carrying no letters, but her sleeves are covered in stitched symbols, some ancient, some merely artistic. She says certain travelers wear their messages now. Embroidered codes, tattoos that declare allegiance, rings etched with words too tiny to read, but meaningful to those who know. You think back to a man you saw days ago, tattoos along his neck that matched the ribbon on a letter you once carried. Was he a courier too? Or something more? There's a quiet power in these bodily messages. They don't rely on wax seals or parchment. They don't need translation. They're reminders that even when you strip away the paper, people still find ways to send what must be said. Later, near a windmill, you pass a man with painted signs strapped to his back. On each, a symbol or phrase, likely part protest, part advertisement, all personal. He waves as he trudges west, messages creaking with every step. That night you shelter in a barn offered by a kindly farmer and his 4 overly curious children. One asks if you carry secrets. You shrug. Don't we all? Another offers to draw you a message in the dirt. It's a crude doodle of a horse, a loaf of bread, and what might be a sun, or a wheel of cheese. Either way, you nod solemnly. The child beams. As you lay your cloak over straw and nestle beside the donkey, you think about the dozens of ways humans have delivered meaning across wood, steel, skin, and song. Some messages are meant to be read, some shouted, some simply carried in silence until the right eyes find them. The letter in your satchel still waits ink on vellum sealed in wax, but suddenly it feels like just one voice in a larger choir of communication. One whisper among many. You close your eyes listening to the wind through the barn slats and dream of swords that speak, walls that write, and riders whose bodies are their scrolls. Dawn again, and your joints stage a quiet rebellion as you rise from the hay. Damp sock. The donkey snorts in agreement or protest and munches on something that definitely wasn't hay when you fell asleep. You sling your satchel over your shoulder, roll your cloak, and begin the final leg of this message's long meandering journey. Today you're going far. Across more than just counties, across kingdoms, borders, and beliefs. Because not all messages stayed within the reach of a day's ride or a familiar dialect. Some were carried across oceans, deserts, mountains, and empires. And somehow, some of them actually arrived. You're headed toward the coast, where ships rock gently in the morning breeze, and seagulls scream with the fury of things that eat garbage. Salt hangs in the air thick and alive. Your message today will go farther than you ever will. And if you're lucky, it'll survive the journey. Medieval maritime mail was a strange beast. No scheduled departures, no tracking numbers. Just the hope that the captain of a merchant vessel or pilgrim ship wouldn't dump your scroll overboard when the wine barrels needed more space. You reach the docks and find a boatman, sunning himself beside his cargo barrels, crates and a sack that whines ominously. You show him your letter sealed and marked with a destination far beyond the waves. He squints at the crest. That's from the bishop's envoy, he says. We're heading near there. I'll see it passed along. Passed along. That's what most cross-ocean messages relied on, a chain of trust and trade. A merchant might carry a message to a port city, where it'd be handed to a caravan master, then another courier, and eventually, if God smiled, a dusty scribe in a stone building on the other side of the world. Or the scroll might end up lining a fruit basket. It was a toss-up. You sit on a coiled rope and watch dockworkers hoist crates. In this moment, you realize how absurdly fragile the whole system is. No backups, no photocopies. If this letter falls into the sea, is eaten by rats, or is mistaken for kindling, it's gone forever. And yet, this is how messages crossed empires. Viking traders once carried letters on longships, tucking them into watertight horn containers and hoping the sea gods were in a good mood. Later, Venetian merchants sailed the Mediterranean with contracts, royal bribes, and espionage disguised as shopping lists. Letters from Constantinople reached Paris. Orders from Baghdad landed in southern Spain. Silk Road couriers, mule trains, and sailors each link in a human chain, stretching farther than most people ever traveled in their lives. Some rulers had entire networks. The Abbasid Caliphate maintained postal stations along its trade routes, as did the Tang dynasty. These systems were often more advanced than anything in medieval Europe. Historians still debate whether European systems were inspired by these Eastern models or developed haphazardly. It's likely both. After all, stealing a good idea is an ancient tradition. You spot a clerk at the dock cataloging the boat's cargo with quick practiced strokes. You ask if messages ever get lost. He snorts. Of course. That's how we know which ones mattered most. The ones people asked about. He shows you a chest marked with wax seals from 4 different ports. This, he says, has been to Tunis, Marseille, Genoa, and now here. Letters inside still sealed. No one knows who they're for anymore, but no one throws them away. He taps the lid. Might be history in there. Might be grocery lists. Your donkey sneezes, interrupting the moment. As you prepare to hand off the letter, you slip a small token inside the wrapping, a smooth stone with a scratched spiral. It's meaningless to the recipient. But it's your mark, your proof, your whisper. Across time I was here. I carried this. And with that, the boatman accepts the scroll, tucks it into an oilskin pouch, and disappears below deck. You're left standing on the dock, a little lighter, a little lonelier. The message is gone, floating away on currents and wind and the good sense of people you'll never meet. You sit again, this time watching the horizon. Someone once sent a letter across the Alps by tying it to a trained dog. Another carved a message into whalebone. And someone else, perhaps wiser than all of them, sent no letter at all, just went in person. You wonder what happens to messages that never reach their destination. Do their words evaporate? Or do they echo faintly in the places they were meant to reach? Maybe the ocean knows. Maybe the wind remembers. You give Damp Sock a pat on the neck and start back inland. Empty satchel, full mind. Somewhere out there your message sails past cliffs and tide pools, past islands and storms, carrying more than words carrying you. And you'll do it all again tomorrow. The road home is quieter. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You've carried sealed whispers through mud and sun taverns and toll booths. You've dodged bandits, braved donkeys, and watched your messages ride off into fog and foam. And still, the next one waits. Today's letter is simple. No royal crest, no velvet ribbon, no threat etched into a sword. Just rough parchment folded 3 times and tied with a thin strip of leather. The seal is cracked, already broken. You're not delivering it. You're chasing it. It was meant for a widow in a riverside village. You arrived a day too late. The place is empty now, swept by fire or plague or something in between. No signs, no screams, no scribes. Just soot-blackened beams and the heavy silence of things left unsaid. You sit on a stone near what was once the chapel, the letter resting in your palm like a ghost that never got to speak. You didn't write it. You don't know what it says, but you can't throw it away. Not yet. The medieval world, for all its pageantry and parchment, was full of moments like this, messages, undelivered intentions, unfulfilled lives that passed one another by inches in the dark. Historians still argue whether the medieval postal tradition was a system or a suggestion, whether it mattered that messages were delivered or merely that they were written, as if the act of setting ink to skin, of crafting meaning with quill and firelight, was enough to count as connection. You think it does. You imagine what this final letter might contain. A confession? A promise? A name? Something tiny that someone once thought was worth sending. across hunger and hills and haunted woods. You think of all the other messages lost along the way. Scrolls that slipped into river currents, parchment gnawed by rats in monastery basements, love notes mistaken for grain invoices, warnings unread, forgiveness unclaimed. Sometimes the message is never the words themselves. Sometimes it's the trying that matters the reaching, the inked belief that someone somewhere is listening. You tuck the letter inside your coat and walk on, not to deliver it, but to remember it. Because in the end, even a letter that's never read carries weight. Even silence can be carried. You don't always get a thank you, or a coin, or even a name. Sometimes your only reward is the warmth of the wax, the hush of the road, and the knowledge that once again you gave the unknown a chance to be heard. And now, here you are again. No more scrolls, no more seals, no more donkeys with opinions. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that settles on a village after midnight when even the embers in the hearth sleep. That hush after a long rain when the puddles stop trembling and the world holds its breath. The road behind you was long, muddy, and often ridiculous. It smelled of wet wool and bad decisions. But it was yours. And every step you took, every message you carried, no matter how small, left a mark. Not every message reaches its destination. Some vanish, some change, some were never meant to arrive. But you kept going. So now, as you settle beneath your blanket, maybe with a fan humming softly in the background or the low stir of nighttime wind brushing against your window, know this: you've traveled through time tonight. You've walked beside monks and mercenaries, clerks and kings. You've seen ink turn into memory and memory into motion. Close your eyes. The road is quiet now. The parchment is blank. There's nothing more to carry. Not tonight. You've done enough. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Maybe by now you've already drifted off to sleep, and if so, we hope this story brought you peace of mind and helped you rest a little easier. Deep sleep makes life better, and we're truly happy to be part of that. Until next time, sweet dreams.